Hi, I'm Rebecca Northan, and I've been asked to talk about improvising full length plays, full length performances with a member of the audience. And my desire is to not do a ton of quote unquote lecturing because it's much better to have a conversation, I think. That is a hot mic. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit, and the work that I do. Um, I started studying improvisation at the Loose Moose Theatre Company the very tail end of 1988 and really got seriously involved in 1989. Um, and have, even though I moved away from Calgary in 2001, I've always maintained a very strong connection with Loose Moose and continued to take class with Keith whenever I can and have brought him out to Toronto many, many times. And aside from being an improviser, I'm also a professional actor and have always wanted to be doing both and have always had a strong desire to eliminate the perceived divide between improvisation and quote unquote regular professional theater. um, so it's been for me I guess at this point almost a 30-year journey of pulling the two sides of my personality together, or the two sides of my professional life together. Um, at some point, I think it was in 2007, maybe, a friend of mine was producing a show in Toronto in the Spiegel tent. And I don't know if you've heard of Spiegel tents. There's, I think, three or four of them in the world, and they're collapsible wooden theaters that are built by a family in Belgium, I think. Google it. Don't be angry if I'm wrong. But these, there's a Spiegel, and they travel. So the Spiegel tent was brought to the World Stage Festival at Harbourfront Centre in 2007 or 2008, and I was asked to create a 10-minute piece for it. And I did not know exactly what I was going to do, but I had the opportunity to observe the performance going on in the tent a couple of weeks before I was going to join the roster. And so the entire vibe and the aesthetic of that show was an adult circus variety show. And so I went, well, everything's kind of sexy and burlesque, and there's contortionists and dancers, maybe a sexy French clown. We'll see if I can get someone from the audience to come up and have a drink with me, and I'll just see if I can get them to kiss me, was the idea. And I had never done clown before. The only reason I chose the clown is because I thought that was an element that was missing in this adult circus. And so that's what I did. That's where this character that I have called Mimi was born. It was in the Spiegel tent, and I think I did 40 performances of that little 10-minute turn over the course of a summer, and it was really popular. So at the end of the summer, I thought, well, what would happen if I took the time to get to know the gentleman that I was bringing up from the audience? That was the question I had. And then I returned to the Loose Moose and talked with the artistic director, Dennis Cahill, about that. And he said, well, why don't you try it? So I think we had maybe 4 or 5 days of conversation. And one of the things I love about Loose Moose, and both Keith and Dennis, was no more discussion. Go out on stage tomorrow night and try it. Choose someone from the audience and just see if you could go for an hour. So the very, very first performance of Blind Date was, I think, 80 minutes long. And it was terrifying to spend that long on stage with an audience member, not knowing what we would do. Had some ideas for signposts. And I think that night the audience had 30 people in it, and the next night the audience doubled, and the next night the audience doubled until we sold out for the rest of the run, which was both delightful and terrifying at the same time. But it set me on this path of really, in a lot of ways, accidentally starting to learn what it means to improvise with an audience member for a long period of time. We were doing Blind Date for about 2 years before my dear friend, who was our stage manager, said, what is this? What is this? If we had to distill it down, what you're trying to do each night, what are you doing? it can't just be you're going out and, it has to be more than just winging it, I guess is what he was saying. So that got us sort of talking about practically what is it that we're doing when we're improvising with an audience member. And what's important to us and what are the values underneath that. And so for me, that really took me back to my training with Keith, which is anytime you're going to bring an audience member up on the stage, you should really treat them like your best house guest. I'm sure we've all seen improv shows where audience members are brought up on stage for 5 minutes, made fun of, used as props, and then sent back. And it can be a good laugh. But I think from the beginning, because we were doing something else and I was holding on to this idea of treat them as your best house guest, that whatever that underlying current was, I think is part of what the audience was responding to. And now we've learned over time that the other thing is the surprising vulnerability that gets shared by the audience member, et cetera. So surprises for me, things that I've learned along the way from working with non-performing members of the audience. First of all, we never, ever, ever choose someone that has a performance background. We work very hard to avoid that. On the rare occasion where we've accidentally chosen someone who's a performer, the moment their foot hits the stage, we know. And the heartbreak of it is that people who are performers have no idea how to act like normal people on stage. They make really strange choices that betray them as performers. Because normal human beings should not want to get on the stage. Does that make sense? We are primates. Big fan of Desmond Morris, the naked ape. We are hairless apes. As primates, we are inherently threatened by being looked at. So to have a desire to come up here in the first place, totally unnatural. So when we're doing blind date, we always mingle with the audience in the lobby before the show. And people who present themselves to us as really, really, really wanting to be in the show, we say, that's so wonderful. Thank you for letting us know. We'll put your name on the list. And then we immediately go, and that is someone we will not be choosing. Because there's some sort of agenda there that's not normal. My first big lesson in improvising long periods of time with the audience, with a one person, was up until I started doing blind date, I thought I was a pretty good listener. And I was totally wrong. Sharing the space for 90 minutes with a non-performer demands 100% attention. I remember standing backstage before the first performance and being absolutely terrified. I don't know what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And then being absolutely shocked that when I brought that person up on stage, suddenly becoming aware of, yes, I'm afraid, but this accountant that I just brought up on stage, who has absolutely no frame of reference for this arena that I've just brought them into, where 200 people are watching and we can hear them, he was so much more afraid than me that his fear and nervousness, which he was working very hard to cover, but was palpable to the point that I had to actually park my own nerves so that I could take care of this person. I've recently read a fantastic quote by a philosopher named Simone Weil, which is, "Attention is the purest and rarest form of generosity." And I went, oh, that's what we're doing. That's partially what we're doing. The other thing too is that in blind date in particular, because we are playing out a scenario that is familiar to everybody, that was kind of the theory, is, well, we've all been on a date, so even though that person isn't a performer, they would understand that setup and how to behave, and that the interest comes from what kind of date is this person, even though we're in an artificial situation. So the first thing was, the first surprise / lesson was, wow, they're more afraid than I am. So taking care of them is a huge responsibility, and one that I take very seriously. The second one, with playing with men in particular, was it dawned on me over time how much pressure there is socially on men to not show that they are afraid ever. So I had this like growing love and empathy for that gender, and an appreciation of, wow, as a woman, and I'm speaking in general terms, as a woman, it's generally more acceptable for me to publicly say, "Oh, I'm so nervous right now. I'm really scared. I'm not sure what to say or what to do." But men being brought up onto the stage, being looked at by everybody, there would be a real, I can't count the number of times that I would look over and see a guy with absolutely trembling hands, hiding them under the table, trying to appear calm, cool, and collected in this, which just kind of made my heart break and melt and really made me love them and make me feel even more compelled to take care of them. So then that really got me going, we hear this in improv class all the time: take care of your partner, make them look good. But what does that actually mean? How do you practically execute that? If you're familiar with Keith's lists, in the back of Impro for Storytellers, there's a section on lists to give someone a good time, to be the life and soul of the party, etc. And then so that heading is then broken down into practical, actionable items. So if we were to say to take care of someone, to make them look good, what are the action items on that list? So that we're doing more, even as improv teachers, than just paying lip service to take care of your partner, make them look good. So for me, that started to help me develop a consciousness around making eye contact, not for too long, leaning forward while that person is speaking, finding places to touch them on the arm, being curious about them, asking open-ended questions, giving up control. So the asking of an open-ended question is a real moment of giving up control. And when I train new mimes to do blind date, or when we do, now I'm expanding, I have other shows that we play with audience members. One is called Legend Has It, which is a fantasy adventure where the member of the audience gets to cross over the threshold from their world into a fantasy world. They have to save the world from an evil wizard. And Undercover is a show where an audience member gets to go undercover as a rookie detective and has to solve a murder. I work with very, very, very skilled improvisers who all, when they are left alone on stage with an audience member for the first time for an extended period of time, go right back to beginner improviser. They're scared. I don't know how to take care of this person, really. And one of the first behaviors that will come out is asking closed-ended questions. So a closed-ended question, there's only a yes or a no answer. And more often than not, there's an assumption inside the question. Do you like children? Rather, the better caretaking question would be, how do you feel about children? I don't know where that will go. Trying to think of an example. A brand new Mimi. It was in the first 10 minutes of her date with the guy from the audience. She says, "What do you do for a living?" He says, "I illustrate children's books." And she said, "So you must love children." And he said, "I don't." And she said, "How can you illustrate children's books if you don't love children? Come on, you must love children." And he said, "No, I really don't." And she said, I think she pushed it again. "Come on, you must love children." At which point he crossed his arms, he leaned away from her, and he shut down. And then that took about 20 minutes to recover from. And then when that show was over, she came off stage and said, that guy, he was really tough. He was really tough. He was really tough. And I said, "Well, I think you should tomorrow watch the video of the show. And your first assignment is to watch the video with the sound off. And just make a note of the time anywhere that he crossed his arms and leaned away from you, and anytime he uncrossed his arms and leaned in. And just make note of that. And then have a cup of tea, and then go back and watch it with the sound on, and note, what did you say right before his body language changed? And she called me halfway through crying. I'm a horrible person. I can't do this show. I had no idea that I don't listen. Oh my gosh. And so every woman that I've trained to, and a couple of the gentlemen that I've trained to do blind date have gone through a very similar process. As improvisers, we're also told, give up control, and yet we are not aware of the minute ways in which we are holding on to some form of control inside the conversation. And closed-ended questions is always an indicator to me that there's a holding onto control inside of the improviser. The other thing I've learned from playing with audience members is to be obvious. We hear that in our improv classes all the time. Be obvious. In blind date, there comes a time sort of 2/3 of the way through the show where we fast forward 5 years into the future, and the audience member can decide if we're married or are we still dating. Only once has someone said we broke up. Oh no, twice. Myself and one other person, one of the other Mimis. Anyhow, and then Mimi's pregnant. It's a surprise for the audience member, and they have to deliver the baby on stage. So for whatever reason, on a particular night, normally we would be in the bedroom for the end of the show, but we didn't make it to the bedroom. We were in the living room. And I came out pregnant, and the water broke, and now you need to deliver baby. And on the set in the living room, there's a little box full of trinkety things, but there's also a miniature bottle of vodka. And there's gum, and there's condoms, and just kind of suggestive things that if they decide to snoop, change them when they find them. And so I was on the couch and screaming, and you've got to help me, the baby's coming. And the audience member reached over and he opened the box and he pulled out the miniature of vodka, which immediately got a huge laugh from the audience. And I as well had a laugh about it. My comedian brain thought, this is such a stressful situation. He's going to open the vodka and do a shot, and who would blame him? But what he did instead was he opened the vodka and he dumped it on his hands, and he sterilized his hands before delivering the baby. And I had such, I internally bowed down to the Zen master in him at that point, and kind of admonished myself internally a little bit for like, oh, yep, I was thinking funny. And he was being 100% obvious, 100% obvious. Of course, you would sterilize your hands before you deliver a baby. There is no other correct answer to that. It would have been fine if he had done a shot. But the sterilizing of the hands, there was an audible gasp from the audience, who then erupted into spontaneous applause. And they liked this guy to begin with. 200 people were in love with him afterwards. So when I'm with an audience member on stage, I also try to think to myself, well, our number one assumption as a company is that every person that we bring on the stage is lovable. Whether it's in Blind Date or Legend Has It or Undercover, they are 100% unique. They're totally lovable. We don't know how their fear will change their behavior. You'll meet the greatest person in the lobby, and then they get up here in front of the lights on them, and they can hear people, and they're worried about being judged, etc. And so then maybe the behavior changes because they're afraid. So number one rule in our company, they're lovable. Number two, whatever they do is correct. It's up to us to shift the performance and the show around them, and to soothe them with eye contact, with curiosity, with a small touch on the arm, getting them a glass of water, etc. Totally lost my train of thought. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Huh? This is what happens to old improvisers. Mm. Any questions? I've talked for a while now. No. Well, you get the microphone.
When you say we, so it's a two part question.
Mm.
You say we, who is we?
Mm-hmm.
And how is the process in the lobby? Because I've never seen it. So
Yeah.
you talk to the audience.
Yep. So blind date is in theory a solo performance. It's not. It's 90% of the time me alone with the audience member. But I have two sonographers backstage who play the waiters in the cafe, police officers when need any other needed characters are played by the sonographers. And then we have a stage manager, sound improviser. We mingle in the lobby before the show because we want the show to start. We want the environment to be altered the moment they walk through the door. So we play great French cafe music. In the early days, the sonographers were actually circulating through the lobby, giving out cups of wine. We did that for like one run and then said, that's so expensive. That's ridiculous. That got changed later to trays of Hershey's Kisses. And now actually what we do is they have these beautiful silver platters with folded slips of paper, and they circulate and they offer people in the audience complimentary compliments. And so they say things like, everyone in the room wants to be on your arm tonight, or you have a smile that could change the world. And some people are really nervous when they're offered. What is it? Why? Why are the pieces of paper different colors? What does it mean? But then once they get them, they're delighted. And we say, just put it in your purse or your pocket, and you'll forget about it, and you'll find it in 8 months, and you'll remember us, and that you're wonderful. In the lobby, our rule as a company is, who did you meet in the lobby that if you were at a cocktail party, you would want to hang out with them and get to know them better? And that's not the person who's like obnoxious and boisterous and overly eager to get on stage, you know, the one that says, don't we have a date later tonight? And also we never ever choose someone that isn't willing to come and play. So if someone in the lobby is avoiding eye contact and turning away as we're coming by, we don't bother them. We look for reluctantly playful.
I'm also curious, just
Microphone.
what's the actual process? Do you come up and just start chatting?
Yeah.
Like you and Jamie, you're just mingling and chatting with the group?
So actually, it's the process has become, I guess, more conscious over time. In the beginning, we didn't know. We were just we just said, just make it feel like a cocktail party out there. Put the music on, greet people, hold on to that idea of every person that comes through the door is a guest in our home. Be a good host. However, now, because we've done, in terms of Blind Date, we've now done over 600 performances of it. As a company, we now will come out and we'll walk through the lobby once without speaking to anyone. And we can usually see, we're sort of carnies about it in a way. We've developed this kind of sixth sense where we then say, who popped? We do a lap and go, who popped? Because oddly, there are like usually 5 or 6 people that are shinier in some way than other people. And I don't know what that is. So we look for shiny, and then we approach those groups of people and we just strike up conversation. And then you're really tuning into your gut at that point. The sonographers do that first before Mimi comes out. So that by the time Mimi comes to the lobby, the sonographers have a short list to say, talk to that person, talk to that person, talk to that person.
And it's already Mimi?
Hmm?
It's already Mimi?
Yes, we mingle in character. Yeah. Same with Legend Has It. We're in character. We're in some kind of character. We might not be in Legend Has It. We're not necessarily in full character, but we're in costume, obviously helping people transition from their outside life into the magic space, and that the lobby is a really liminal space where we're starting to bleed from their world into our world. Um, and now we're really, really diligent of saying to someone, so do you know how the show works? If they don't, we explain that we pick one person to be in the show. And then we say, we're thinking maybe we'd like to put you on our maybe list. How do you feel about that? And then we watch the body. The body will say no before the mouth says anything. And if they have a spouse or a partner, we also check in with that person. Your partner's on the maybe list. How would you feel about them being on stage? And we watch the partner. If the person we're interested in says yes, but the partner says no, we won't choose them, because that connection between this person on the stage and their partner left behind, if it's not clean, can ruin the performance. But they will know, they will consent to being on the maybe list. And we always tell them to, listen, there's 5 or 6 other people on the maybe list. If you don't get chosen, enjoy the show. And if you do, be yourself, have a good time. And that it's our job to take care of you, make sure you have a nice time. And we say that to them in the lobby, but it also gets said to them again on stage, in front of the audience. Hey, our job, all of us collectively, all these people up here, it is our job to take care of you, make sure you have a nice time. You know, at the end of this experience, we want you to feel like you've had your best day at a spa or something like that. There's a question back there, and yeah.
I'm curious if you've had to add any structural elements or options for audience who remain uncomfortable once they're up there, lead them out.
Yes, we do have a structural element, which I will share with you. But before I do, I will sort of put this on the table, which is blind date is protected by copyright, because after 2 years of doing it, I got picked up by a Broadway producer, and the first thing he said to me was, who else can do the show besides you? Because I'm not going to produce a show that has one person in the lead role in case you get sick. I don't want to lose money, which is why I started to train other people. And then secondly said, we're going to copyright this. Or at least we're going to apply for copyright. It's improvised, so let's see if we can do it. Write down as much as you can. But our show is quite structured, and as we continue to work in this genre that we're calling spontaneous theater, we're becoming more and more structured. So it's a real blend of playwriting and improvisation. So one of the elements that actually helped us get copyright was this structural thing that you're asking about, and that is that no matter which show we're doing, there's a timeout box. And so the audience member is told very early on, they're actually taken into the timeout box and spoken to outside of the world of the play, and then it's explained to them, listen, if at any point while we're doing this thing together, if you're confused, you're overwhelmed, anything like that, you just call time out, and we'll just come over here to the timeout out area. We'll do a little check-in with you, and whatever's going on, we'll fix it for you. That came out originally when I was conceiving conceiving Blind Date. I thought it would be a time machine, because I was like, I want to do like a whole relationship from when we meet, fast forward to like having kids, and you know, I wanted the show to end like way in the future when we're seniors and one of us will die in the other's arms, and that was too much pretending for the audience member, too much make-believe in the dating scenario. So we cut that off, and it really just turned into this timeout box. Anyway, I have to sort of share that part, because I often have discussions with other improvisers that there's one school of thought, which is what we do as improvisers is all communal, and it's this like open source sharing, and I invented a game and then I saw it, you know, I taught it, and then, or I was at a festival and I learned a game, and we share all of this kind of stuff. Which on the games level, I go, yes, absolutely. For me, as you start to move up into structured show, there are some improvisers that are, I guess, far more generous than I am, who are like, yeah, take my show, give it a try wherever you are. But because I live more on a playwriting branch in the combining of structured theater, providing opportunity for improvisation inside of it. It's more like that. So you don't do other people's plays and not pay them for it. Same with what I do. So the timeout box is part of that copyright protection. There's a question back there.
It's pretty similar. It's basically, what do you do if someone goes into the timeout box and it's like, I'm out, I'm done, and you've got about 40 minutes left?
Yeah, so that happened. The first time it ever happened, we were playing off Broadway, and I chose a young. It was very early on, so we weren't as conscious of the things we were doing and what people needed. We chose someone in the audience or in the lobby that was very fun and very playful. Brought him up on stage, and the first yellow flag was that I thought he was 28 or 29, and he was 21. And I usually don't pick people that young, because the sense of bravado that young men come on stage with is heartbreaking. Yeah, so he was 21. So in the first 10 minutes of the show, the first time there was a collective laugh from the audience, because he said something very truthful. I don't know what it was, but he was really thrown by the collective laugh. And I saw a young man's ego interpret that as they're laughing at me. And so he started to lose his mind. And then he said something insulting to me. So I will also use the timeout to correct any behavior that's making them look less than lovable. So I have compassion and empathy for the behavior because it's coming from a place of fear, and we all know what that is. But then the timeout will get used to go, hey, how are you? What's going on? You just said something really like a little bit unkind. So we'll do a check-in about that. I don't really remember exactly what he said. In any case, I gave him the option. I said, listen, I don't want you to suffer up here if you're not having a good time. Here was the mistake that I made. But if you do want to sit down, you have to break up with me, and you have to make it a good one. So I gave him permission for what happened next. I said, do you want to break up or do you want to stay together? And he said, I'll decide when we get back on stage. So I said, okay. And we came and we sat down. And I went to say something, and he said, shut the fuck up. And what you just did is what 90 people in New York did. And I was sort of shocked. And then I went to say something again, and he said, I told you to shut the fuck up. And he batted at my wine glass, and it shattered on the stage. And then because actually he was a nice person, when the glass broke, it kind of broke the spell that he was in. And he went, oh, I'm so sorry. And he stood up and started to move towards the broken glass. And I didn't want him to cut himself, so I put my hand out to touch him on the elbow to say, don't touch the glass. And the moment I touched his elbow, he threw my hand off and said, get your fucking hands off me. Which is the only time in my life I've ever felt unsafe on stage. And you felt all of the air go out of the theater. Everybody was unsafe in that moment. And so I got really small and stayed in my chair and, did what primates do and broke eye contact. And then the next thing I knew, my brother was on stage with me. So my brother does the show with me. He's one of the stenographers. And this was one of the things that was wonderful about this moment is the New York producer, the first thing he actually wanted to do was get rid of the stenographers and just have crew guys. And I said, absolutely not. I must have skilled improvisers backstage. So this happened. My brother was on stage as the waiter with a broom and a dustpan, and he just stood next to me and pushed his body into mine and said, please ignore me. I will clean the mess, pretend I'm not here. But he was not going anywhere. So he was quietly sweeping up broken glass while I turned back to this lovely young man. And I said, so what's going on? And he said, well, and then he started to take my direction, which was, if you're going to break up with me, make it a good one. He said, yeah, well, you lied about your age. you said you were 30 something, like you're in your late 20s and you're clearly like in your like late 30s and you're super old and you're ugly. And he just kept going and I was literally weeping. But he was taking direction and I just started to agree. I said, you're right, I did. I lied about my age. You're very attractive and I just wanted to impress you and I'm sorry. And that's not a great way to start a relationship. And I can't blame you for being upset. And I wish you well in your life. And then he went and sat down. And I was still sitting there crying. And also at this point, torrents of panic sweat pouring down. Like I had to have a midweek dry clean after that. And there were 75 minutes left to fill. And so, but then that's where the training kicks in. When you're afraid, apply a rule. So I just went, okay, what comes next? In my mind, what comes next? My brother said, what do you need? And I said, I think I need to go home. Could I have, it's illegal, but could I have a bottle of wine to go? And he said, yeah. So they gave me a little bottle of wine and I said, okay. And I think I just floated off stage going, well, thank God there's other improvisers. I came backstage and grabbed the other stenographer and said, get me 2 women flip to the apartment, get me 2 women from the audience now. So they changed the set. They got 2 women. They brought them up on stage so that by the time I walked through the door, my 2 girlfriends were there. I got to burst into tears when I walked in. Of course, they'd witnessed everything. So they were like, honey, what's happened? What happened? So I could say, I just had a worse date. They started to say, that guy was an asshole. Not realizing you guys, you didn't see the date, not in our reality, but you did. And I said, but then this is the other thing that what the audience member does is correct, and we have compassion and love and empathy for it. And so I said, no, he wasn't. I did lie to him. I lied to him about my age, and I made jokes, and and he was lovely. And because he's still sitting there watching, he needs to know that I'm still fiercely defending him and making him right. But then we still had, now 70 minutes to fill. So I just having wine and chatting, and then there was a knock at the door. I was just in such an improv, I was in shock. I was like, okay, what comes next? There's a knock at the door. I answer the door. Yes, this is my brother dressed as the neighbor. Hey, are you okay? I saw you come in crying. Oh, hi, ladies. Hi. So I just had a terrible date, and anyway, we're having a girls' night, and he said, I'm so sorry. Do you know the guy that lives in apartment 2B has a crush on you? And I said, no, I'm too old to be lovable. No, he really he likes you. I was like, I don't know if it's too soon for you, but I could introduce you if you want. But I asked the girlfriends, I don't know, I think it's too soon. And one of them said, you need to get back on that horse, honey. Great example of audience members being obvious, and they have an unconscious understanding that the narrative has to move forward. It has to move forward, and we want the heroes to win. So the neighbor said, ladies, you want to move this party to my apartment? And he took the 2 women off stage, and they went to the audience and got my second choice. And he got to be introduced as the heroic neighbor from down the hall that already had a crush on me, and we did the rest of the show. And then the 3 producers whose jaws were on the floor for the whole thing went, okay, that's why the backstage people are improvisers and they're not crew guys. Yep. Oh, microphone.
Yeah, it's just that when we play together, anyone on stage, especially if we really know each other or trust each other immediately,
Yeah.
we push each other.
Yes.
We go dark or negative, and one thing, I can push this button.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, does that happen?
Yeah.
Do you really challenge someone?
Mm-hmm.
And is it always them playing them, or then do they kind of transform into a version of them that people are?
No, they always play themselves because they, at least in Black, there's no capacity to be anything. Well, I'm assuming they're playing themselves. I don't know them in their personal lives to know how, but they're in such a foreign environment. I don't know if they have the faculties to do that. On occasion, when I've sensed like, hey, you're being a bit performy, we'll take a time out to talk about it. I've in timeout, I've had men say, really, am I going to be up here the whole time? Because I'm really not that interesting. But then I get to ask the audience how many people are bored right now, and they're met by silence. And then I can say, so, I mean, maybe you think you're a bit boring because you live your life every day and you live with yourself, but we don't know you, and we are absolutely fascinated. And you can see a little like happen. But yes, absolutely, I push them. So we always start very gently, but then because we're on a date and I want to get to know them, and then I love to ask people things like, do you believe in God? And, you know, we follow the threads of that's the structure for me, the playwriting side of the structure, knowing that there are signposts, is the thing actually that allows me to completely relax into the moment with the audience member and be totally present, not ever worried of where's this going? I can just say, and how was your day? And we can go from there. So yes, I'll push things in. And in the case of Blind Date, the show is actually structured to challenge their intimacy boundaries in different ways as we go. So once we've gotten to know each other a bit at the table, if a piece of music comes on, will you pick up the social cue and ask me to dance? That kind of thing. Will you allow me to take you to a second location, which is my apartment? Some guys say no. Oh no, I can't go to your apartment. Let's go to a park. Okay, let's go to a park. First time that happened, my brother showed up on stage as an undercover detective on his phone. He'd Googled crazy guy, and he had this photo of a terrifying looking guy, and came in and was like, I'm sorry, have you seen this man in the park? No, why? Oh, he's a crazed killer. He's on the loose. It's not safe for you to be out here tonight. I suggest that you go to wherever you live and lock your doors. I was like, oh, no, okay, let's go. So we'll have fun doing stuff like that. But yeah, I want to, the other thing is too, is human beings, they arrive up here, they're nervous, but they actually do relax over the time because we can't stay in a panic for 90 minutes. So they start to open up and relax, which on the outside looks like the date is going very well, and they look like really good actors. And I really want to get to know them, because when we get specific answers to questions, that's when the audience starts to go like, oh, I lost my dad when I was young, or, you know, whatever happens to come out. I had a date with a guy in St. Paul who I loved. We bonded over our mutual hatred of poor punctuation being used in public signs. And I also confessed to traveling with a Jiffy marker and like correcting spelling and punctuation on signs in public, which he loved. And he contacted me via Facebook a couple of days after the show and asked if he could take me out for coffee. And I said yes, and he was really nervous at coffee, and he wanted me to know that he was agoraphobic, that for 8 years that he had not been jogging outside. He'd been running on a treadmill in his basement looking at a concrete wall. But then he said yes to doing Blind Date, and he didn't know why, and then he didn't die from doing Blind Date. And then that gave him the idea that maybe he could go jogging outside. And so he was crying at that point, holding my hand and saying, I went running outside for the first time in 8 years because of your show. So we get those little like gifts along the way. I go, oh, this is great. This is what happens when you actually give someone your full attention and you listen to them and you say, you're good enough. Like everything you are is good enough. Who you are as a date, who you are as the fantasy hero, who you are as the undercover detective, whether you solve the murder or not, just how you are and what we learn about you is enough. So that's kind of my philosophy for working with audience members. I'm getting the wrap it up signal. We can talk more as we cross paths. Anyway, thanks everybody.